Mother arrives home late, finds her 9-year-old son covered in bruises, and takes him to the emergency room. When the boy tells the doctor what happened, he immediately calls 911. The fluorescent lights of Boston Memorial Hospital buzzed overhead as Jessica Reynolds checked her watch for the 5th time in an hour. 10:47 p.m. Her shift had officially ended at 8, but the pile of patient charts hadn't processed themselves, and the night nurse had called in sick again. The familiar ache in her lower back had spread to her shoulders, a physical manifestation of the weight she carried daily. "You should go home, Jessica," said Nurse Rodriguez, her dark eyes softening with concern as she leaned against the nurse's station. "You've been here since 6 this morning. That's, what, almost 17 hours now." Jessica tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, revealing the deep circles under her gray eyes. I know. I'm just finishing Mrs. Abernathy's discharge papers." Her fingers trembled slightly as she signed the last form. Exhaustion or caffeine? She couldn't tell the difference anymore. "Your boy's waiting, isn't he?" Rodriguez asked, her voice dropping to a gentle murmur that somehow cut through Jessica more than any reprimand could have. Oliver. The thought of her son waiting at home sent a mixture of love and guilt coursing through her. At 9 years old, he was too young to be alone, but her neighbor, Mr. Davidson, had assured her it was no trouble to check in on him after school until she got home. "A retired teacher has plenty of time," he'd said with that grandfatherly smile that had initially put her worries at ease. "He's with Mr. Davidson," Jessica replied, unable to meet Rodriguez's gaze. "He's good with him. Still," Rodriguez pressed, taking the charts from Jessica's hands with gentle insistence. "Go. I've got this. That boy needs his mama." The drive home through Boston's rain-slick streets was a blur of red taillights and green storefront signs reflecting in puddles. Jessica's mind wandered to the growing distance between her and Oliver. There had been a time when he would run to her, arms outstretched, face alight with joy no matter how brief her absence. Now, at 9, he greeted her with shrugs and one-word answers, his attention fixed on his video games or sketch pad. Was this normal growing independence, or had her increasing absences created a chasm she hadn't noticed widening? The call from her mother's doctor 3 weeks ago had only complicated matters. Congestive heart failure, they'd said. Stable but requiring care. With her mother in a rehab facility in Rhode Island and her sister overseas with the military, the burden of weekend visits fell on Jessica's shoulders. Another responsibility. Another absence from Oliver's life. The rain had turned to a fine mist by the time Jessica pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building, a modest 3-story complex in Dorchester that had once been a textile factory. The conversion had left exposed brick walls and large windows, but also drafty corners and temperamental plumbing. Still, it was home, and the rent was manageable on a nurse's salary, if only just. The building was quiet at nearly 11, most windows dark except for the blue flicker of late-night television. Jessica climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell. She paused at apartment 3B, Mr. Davidson's place, wondering if she should knock and thank him for watching Oliver again. The older man had been a godsend these past months, always ready with a kind word and helping hand. He had moved in about a year ago, a retired English teacher from somewhere in the Midwest, Kansas or Nebraska, she couldn't remember which. Fatigue won out over courtesy, and Jessica continued to 3D her own apartment. She slipped her key into the lock as quietly as possible, hoping Oliver might still be awake. They hadn't had a real conversation in days. "Oliver?" she called softly, stepping into the darkened living room. The television was off, and the apartment held that peculiar stillness of an empty space. "Sweetie, I'm home." No response. Jessica flicked on the light, revealing the modest living room with its second-hand furniture and walls adorned with Oliver's artwork. His backpack lay on the floor near the coffee table, homework spilled out beside it, math worksheets half completed with eraser marks smudging the margins. "Oliver!" A flutter of worry stirred in her chest as she moved toward his bedroom. The door was closed, unusual for this time of night. Normally, even when upset with her, he left it slightly ajar, a small nightlight casting star-shaped patterns on his ceiling. Tonight it was shut tight. Jessica knocked gently. "Oliver, honey? It's Mom." She pressed her ear to the door, hearing nothing but her own heartbeat. "I'm coming in, okay?" The door creaked as she pushed it open. The room was dark save for the glow of streetlights filtering through the blinds, casting prison bar shadows across the rumpled bed. For a moment, Jessica thought the room was empty, and panic seized her throat. Then she saw him. Oliver was huddled in the far corner of his bed, back pressed against the wall, knees drawn up to his chest. He was still fully dressed in jeans and a long-sleeved Red Sox t-shirt, despite the lateness of the hour. His sandy brown hair fell across his forehead, obscuring his eyes. "Oliver," Jessica whispered, relief giving way to concern at his unusual posture. "What are you doing sitting in the dark, buddy?" When he didn't respond, Jessica moved closer, perching on the edge of his bed. She reached for the lamp on his nightstand, but his voice stopped her. "Don't," he said, the word barely audible. "Please." There was something in his voice, a fragility Jessica had never heard before, that made her blood run cold. Maternal instinct surged through her exhaustion, senses suddenly alert to the wrongness of the moment. "Oliver, look at me," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the rising alarm within her. "What's wrong?" Slowly, painfully, Oliver raised his head. In the dim light, Jessica could see the dark smudge on his cheek, what might have been a shadow if not for the unnatural swelling around his eye. Without thinking, she reached for the lamp again, needing to see. "Mom, don't." But it was too late. The soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminated what the darkness had mercifully hidden. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. Oliver's right eye was swollen nearly shut, a purple-black bruise blooming across his cheekbone. His lower lip was split, a thin line of dried blood crusted at the corner of his mouth. When her eyes traveled down, she saw him clutching his right arm protectively against his side. "Oh my God!" she breathed, horror and fury rising in equal measure. "Oliver, what happened? Who did this to you?" His eyes, one green and clear, the other nearly hidden by swelling, filled with tears. "I fell," he mumbled, the lie transparent and heartbreaking. "No." Jessica's voice was firmer now, nurse mode activating through the maternal panic. "No, you didn't fall. Someone hurt you." She reached toward him, and he flinched, the movement so slight it might have been imperceptible to anyone but a mother. That tiny recoil broke something inside her. "I'm taking you to the hospital," she said, rising from the bed, mind already racing through protocols and procedures she knew by heart from the other side of the curtain. "Right now." "No." Fear flashed across Oliver's face, genuine and alarming. "I'm okay, Mom. It's not that bad." Jessica knelt before him, careful not to touch him, to give him space despite every instinct screaming to hold him close. "Oliver, I need to know what happened. Please, baby. Who did this to you?" Oliver's eyes darted to the window, then the door, before finally settling somewhere over Jessica's shoulder. "I can't tell you," he whispered. He said not to tell. The words landed like a physical blow. "He? Who is he, Oliver?" But Oliver pressed his lips together, wincing as the motion pulled at his split lip. A tear escaped, tracking down his bruised cheek. "I'm tired, Mom. Can I just go to sleep?" Jessica fought the urge to press further, recognizing the signs of withdrawal, of self-protection. 13 years in emergency medicine had taught her that pushing too hard too soon often caused victims to retreat further into silence. Victim. The word echoed in her mind, terrible and final. Her son was a victim, and she didn't know of what or whom. "We're going to the emergency room," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I need to get you checked out, make sure nothing's broken. But, no buts, Oliver. This is non-negotiable." She softened her voice, reaching out slowly to brush his hair from his forehead, careful to avoid the bruising. "I promise I'll be with you the whole time. We'll figure this out together. Okay?" Something in her words seemed to reach him, a tether thrown into deep water. He nodded once, the movement small and pained. Can you walk? Or does it hurt too much? I can walk, he said, uncurling from his defensive position with the cautious movements of someone much older than 9. When he stood, Jessica noticed the slight hitch in his step, the way he kept his right arm pressed against his side. The drive to Boston Memorial was silent save for the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers clearing the persistent mist. Jessica's mind raced, replaying the past weeks, searching for signs she might have missed. Had Oliver been quieter lately? More withdrawn? She had attributed any changes to her longer hours, to the normal turbulence of childhood, to her own distraction with her mother's illness. Guilt gnawed at her edges. She should have noticed, should have seen, should have protected him. But from whom? The question circled like a vulture. Who would hurt her son? A bully at school? Someone in the building? The possibilities multiplied, each more horrifying than the last. Boston Memorial's emergency entrance was painfully familiar to Jessica, though never before from this side. The sliding doors parted with a soft hiss, revealing the controlled chaos she usually navigated with professional detachment. Now, with Oliver beside her, the bright lights and antiseptic smell struck her as harsh, invasive. The triage nurse looked up, recognition dawning. Jessica? What are you? Then she saw Oliver, and her professional mask slipped back into place. What happened? My son needs to be seen, Jessica said, placing a protective hand on Oliver's shoulder. Possible facial fracture, potential rib or arm injury. The nurse, Diane, who had covered shifts with Jessica for years, nodded, her eyes communicating what her voice wouldn't in front of Oliver. She recognized the signs as clearly as Jessica did. Room 3 is open. I'll page Dr. Reeves. She handed Jessica the clipboard with intake forms, her fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. We'll take good care of him, Jessica. Room 3 was one of the smaller examination rooms, designed for non-critical cases that still required privacy. Jessica helped Oliver onto the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath him. She filled out the forms mechanically, aware of Oliver's eyes tracking her movements. Mom! His voice was small, uncertain. Am I in trouble? The question pierced her. No, baby, she said firmly, setting the clipboard aside. You are not in trouble. Not at all. Someone hurt you, and that is never, ever your fault. Do you understand me? He nodded, but the doubt lingering in his eyes told her he wasn't convinced. A soft knock preceded Dr. Thomas Reeves' entrance. In his early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, Dr. Reeves was one of the few emergency physicians Jessica genuinely trusted with pediatric cases. His demeanor changed subtly as he recognized her. Jessica, he said, surprise evident before his training reasserted itself. His eyes moved to Oliver, assessing professionally even as he maintained a gentle smile. And this must be Oliver. I've heard a lot about you from your mom. Oliver didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the floor. I'm Dr. Reeves, he continued, pulling up a rolling stool to sit at eye level with Oliver. Your mom works with me sometimes. Did you know that? She's one of our best nurses. A tiny flicker of pride crossed Oliver's face before disappearing back into wariness. Looks like you've had a rough day, Dr. Reeves said, keeping his voice conversational. Mind if I take a look at those bruises? Oliver glanced at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. It's okay, sweetie. Dr. Reeves just needs to make sure you're all right. Dr. Reeves' examination was thorough but gentle, his running commentary designed to put Oliver at ease. I'm going to touch your cheek now, just very lightly. Let me know if anything hurts. Good job. Now I need to check your ribs. Can you take a deep breath for me? Jessica watched, heart constricting as Dr. Reeves documented each injury. The facial bruising, the split lip, the tenderness along Oliver's ribs, the swelling in his right wrist. Not broken, probably sprained. The clinical descriptions couldn't capture the horror of seeing such injuries on her child. Oliver, Dr. Reeves said finally, his voice still gentle but with an underlying seriousness. Can you tell me how you got hurt? The silence stretched. Oliver's eyes darted to Jessica, then back to Dr. Reeves. I fell, he said. The same transparent lie he'd offered earlier. Dr. Reeves nodded, unsurprised. That must have been some fall. Were you at school when it happened? Oliver shook his head. At home then? Another head shake. Dr. Reeves adjusted his approach. Sometimes, Oliver, people get hurt because someone else hurts them. Has anyone been hurting you? Oliver's breathing quickened, his uninjured hand clutching the paper covering on the examination table. I'm not supposed to tell, he whispered. He said he'd hurt Mom if I told. Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. Oliver, she said, fighting to keep her voice level. No one is going to hurt me or you. You're safe here. We just want to help you. Dr. Reeves continued with practiced calm. Whoever told you that was lying, Oliver. They said that to scare you, but they can't hurt you or your mom anymore. We won't let them. Something in Dr. Reeves' quiet confidence seemed to reach Oliver. He looked up, tears welling in his eyes. It was Mr. Davidson, he said, voice barely audible. He said it was discipline, that I was bad. The name hit Jessica like a physical blow. Mr. Davidson, the kindly retired teacher who had offered to watch Oliver, who had been alone with her son for hours each day while she worked, who had gained her trust with his gentle manner and helpful presence. When did this happen, Oliver? Dr. Reeves asked, while Jessica struggled to process the revelation. Today. And other days too. Oliver's voice grew smaller with each word. He said I was ungrateful, that Mom works so hard and I don't appreciate it, that I needed to learn respect. Jessica's vision blurred with tears of rage and guilt. How had she not seen it? How had she left her child with this monster? Dr. Reeves maintained his professional composure, though a muscle tightened in his jaw. Oliver, what Mr. Davidson did was wrong. Very wrong. No adult should ever hurt a child, no matter what they say the reason is. He turned to Jessica, his expression grave. I need to call the police and file a report with Child Protective Services. This is a clear case of child abuse. The words child abuse echoed in the sterile examination room. Jessica nodded numbly, unable to form words past the knot of emotion in her throat. Dr. Reeves moved toward the phone on the wall, but paused, his hand hovering over the receiver. Is there anything else, Oliver? He asked, his voice gentle but insistent. Anything else Mr. Davidson did that made you uncomfortable or scared? Oliver's eyes filled with fresh tears, his small body beginning to shake with suppressed sobs. He took pictures, he whispered, the words falling like stones. He said they were for a special project. That I was special. Dr. Reeves' expression hardened, and he picked up the phone, dialing 911 with deliberate precision. This is Dr. Thomas Reeves at Boston Memorial Hospital Emergency Department, he said, voice steady and authoritative. I need to report a case of child abuse and possible exploitation. Yes, the victim is here with his mother. He covered the mouthpiece, turning to Jessica. Officers will be here soon. They'll want to talk to both of you. Jessica nodded, moving to sit beside Oliver on the examination table. She wanted to hold him, to wrap him in her arms and shield him from the world, but the way he held himself, tense, guarded, told her he wasn't ready for that. Instead, she placed her hand palm up on the table between them, an invitation rather than a demand. After a moment's hesitation, Oliver's small hand crept into hers, fingers curling with desperate strength around her own. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered, tears spilling down his bruised cheeks. I tried to be good. I really tried. Oh, Oliver. Jessica's voice broke as she finally allowed her own tears to fall. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. This wasn't your fault. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have protected you. Dr. Reeves finished his call and approached them again. His demeanor softened with compassion. The police are on their way. They'll have a lot of questions, but there's a special detective who works with children. She's very nice. He handed Oliver a tissue, then Jessica. What happens next might be scary, but it's all to make sure you're safe, Oliver. To make sure Mr. Davidson can't hurt you or anyone else. Oliver nodded, seeming to shrink further into himself at the mention of what was to come. Jessica tightened her grip on his hand, a silent promise. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Outside the examination room, the controlled chaos of the emergency department continued, oblivious to the small tragedy unfolding behind the closed door. Monitors beeped, nurses called out vitals, doctors moved between curtains with practiced efficiency. Jessica had always found comfort in the rhythm of it, the sense of purpose in the midst of crisis. Now, sitting beside her injured son in a room that suddenly felt too small, too exposed, that same environment felt alien and threatening. The longest night of her life had only just begun, and dawn seemed impossibly far away. Detective Laura Morales had seen too many cases like this one. 15 years with Boston PD's Special Victims Unit had left her with a face that rarely betrayed emotion. But the photographs in the medical file made her jaw tighten imperceptibly. The bruising pattern on the boy's torso wasn't random. It was deliberate, methodical, the work of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The emergency department's family conference room was meant to be comforting, with its soft blue walls and framed watercolors of seascapes. But nothing could soften the reality of what had brought them here at 2:17 a.m. "Mrs. Reynolds," Detective Morales began, her voice gentle but direct. "I understand this is incredibly difficult, but I need to ask Oliver some questions about what happened." Jessica sat rigid in her chair, the foam cup of hospital coffee cooling untouched between her hands. Sleep deprivation had hollowed her cheeks, giving her a haunted appearance that matched the devastation in her eyes. "He's only 9, she whispered. "He's been through enough tonight." Morales nodded. Unlike many of her colleagues, she never rushed this part. The psychology of trauma was delicate. One wrong move could silence a child forever. "I understand. I've received special training to work with children who have experienced trauma. Oliver won't have to tell his story many times. Just once, to me. We'll record it, with your permission, to prevent him from having to repeat it." Jessica's gaze drifted to the small observation room where Oliver sat with a hospital social worker. Through the one-way glass, she could see him hunched over a drawing pad, his injured arm now properly wrapped in a supportive bandage. His small face was a canvas of bruises, the swelling around his eye having worsened in the hours since their arrival. "Will he have to see Mr. Davidson again?" Jessica asked, the name catching in her throat like a shard of glass. "Not if I can help it," Morales replied with quiet conviction. "We've already dispatched officers to Mr. Davidson's apartment. If what Oliver says matches the evidence we find there, Davidson won't be going anywhere except custody." Jessica closed her eyes, a single tear tracking down her cheek. "I trusted him. I let him into our lives. All those hours." Her voice broke, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Morales leaned forward slightly. Her dark eyes held a compassion that came from understanding rather than pity. "Mrs. Reynolds, I need to say something that you might not believe right now, but it's important. This is not your fault." A bitter laugh escaped Jessica. "I'm a nurse. I'm trained to recognize signs of abuse. I left my son with a—" She lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "A predator. How is that not my fault? Abusers like Davidson are experts at deception. They cultivate trust. They present themselves as helpers, especially to people who are vulnerable or overwhelmed." Morales' tone remained steady. "They're counting on your self-blame to keep you silent, to protect them." The detective's words seemed to penetrate Jessica's armor of guilt, if only momentarily. She straightened in her chair, exhaustion giving way to a flash of anger. "What happens now? With Davidson? Based on Dr. Reeves' report and the preliminary statement you've given, we'll arrest him. The district attorney will determine charges once we have Oliver's statement and process any evidence from Davidson's apartment." Morales glanced at her watch. "My colleagues should be executing a search warrant as we speak." Jessica's mind flashed to the apartment across the hall from hers. The bookshelves lined with classics, the framed teaching certificates, the photographs of smiling children from Davidson's years as an educator. Had they all been prey? The thought made her physically ill. When you interview Oliver, Jessica said, her voice steadier now. I want to be there. Morales considered this. Usually, children speak more freely without a parent present. They often try to protect their parents from the full truth. He needs to know I'm not afraid to hear it, Jessica insisted. That nothing he says will make me love him less. After a moment, Morales nodded. All right, but if at any point I feel his disclosure is being inhibited by your presence, I may ask you to step out. Can you agree to that? Yes, Jessica said, then added almost to herself, I've been absent enough already. The interview room had been designed with children in mind. The chairs were lower, the table round rather than rectangular. A shelf held stuffed animals and fidget toys. A digital recording device sat unobtrusively in the center of the table, its red light the only indication of its purpose. Oliver sat beside Jessica, his uninjured hand clutching a small blue stress ball the social worker had given him. His eyes remained fixed on the swirling patterns in the industrial carpet. Detective Morales sat across from them, her posture deliberately relaxed. She had removed her blazer and badge, leaving only a simple blouse and slacks. Nothing about her screamed, police. A calculated decision to put Oliver at ease. Hi, Oliver, she began, her voice warm but not falsely bright. My name is Laura. My job is to talk to kids when grown-ups have done things that hurt them or scared them. Oliver's grip on the stress ball tightened, but he didn't look up. There are no wrong answers to any questions I might ask, Morales continued. And if you don't know or don't remember something, that's perfectly okay to say. The most important thing is that you tell the truth, even if you think it might be scary or make someone upset. Do you understand? A small nod. Can you say it out loud for me, please? Just so I know you understand. Yes. The word was barely audible. Thank you, Oliver. That's really helpful. Morales glanced at Jessica, then back to Oliver. I know Dr. Reeves already asked you some questions about how you got hurt. I'm going to ask some more questions about that. Okay? Another tiny nod, followed by a whispered, okay. Can you tell me who hurt you? Oliver's breathing quickened, his eyes darting to Jessica and then back to the floor. Jessica fought the urge to speak, to reassure him, knowing that Morales needed to establish her own rapport with him. Mr. Davidson, Oliver finally said, the name so soft it was almost inaudible. Thank you for telling me that, Morales said. That was very brave. Can you tell me when this happened? Today, after school. Oliver's fingers worked the stress ball rhythmically. And other times too. When did it start? The first time. Oliver's brow furrowed in concentration. After Mom started visiting Grandma in the hospital. When she had to work late too. Jessica felt each word like a physical blow. 3 weeks. Her son had been suffering for 3 weeks while she shuttled between work and her mother's bedside. What happened the first time? Morales asked. Oliver's lower lip trembled. I was playing my game too loud. He said the neighbors would complain. That Mom would get in trouble with the building manager. His voice grew stronger as he recounted the memory. He said I needed discipline. What did he do then, Oliver? He hit me with his belt. On my legs. Oliver's free hand moved unconsciously to his thigh. He said if I told Mom, they'd make her move out because of me. That we'd be homeless. Jessica bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, trying to contain the sob that threatened to escape. Morales gave her a warning glance before continuing. Did it happen again after that first time? Oliver nodded. If I was too loud, or didn't finish my homework, or didn't eat the food he made. The words came faster now, as though a dam had broken. He said Mom was working so hard, and I was ungrateful, that I needed to learn to be a good boy. The clinical part of Jessica's mind, the nurse who had seen abuse cases in the ER, recognized the classic manipulation tactics. Isolation, blame, fear. The human part of her, the mother, wanted to tear apart the universe and rebuild it without men like Davidson in it. Oliver, Morales continued, her tone gentle but persistent. Dr. Reeves mentioned that Mr. Davidson took pictures of you. Can you tell me about that? The change was immediate. Oliver curled further into himself. The stress ball now clutched so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I don't want to talk about the pictures," he whispered. "I know it's hard," Morales said, "but it's very important. Did he take pictures when he hurt you?" A small shake of the head. "Was it different times?" A nod. "Did he ask you to do things for the pictures? Or change your clothes?" Oliver's face crumpled, tears spilling down his bruised cheeks. "He said we were making special art. That I was his special friend." A shuddering breath. "I didn't want to, but he said he'd hurt Mom if I didn't." Jessica couldn't stop herself. She reached for Oliver's hand, careful not to crowd him but needing the physical connection. To her surprise, he gripped her fingers tightly, as though anchoring himself. "You're doing so well, Oliver," Morales said, her voice steady despite the horror of what she was hearing. "Just a few more questions, okay? Did Mr. Davidson ever touch you in ways that made you uncomfortable?" Oliver's entire body tensed. The stress ball fell forgotten to the floor as he pressed himself against Jessica's side. "He tried," came the muffled reply. "Last week." But then Mrs. Patel from upstairs knocked on the door. She brought cookies. His voice broke on the last word, relief and trauma intermingling. "He got really mad after she left. Is that when he hurt you like he did today?" Morales asked. Oliver nodded against Jessica's arm. "He said I'd done it on purpose, that I made noise so she would come. But I didn't, Mom," he said, looking up at Jessica with desperate intensity. "I promise I didn't. I was being quiet like he said." "I believe you, baby," Jessica whispered, her heart shattering all over again. "I believe you." Morales gave them a moment before continuing. "Oliver, do you know if Mr. Davidson has done this to other kids?" For the first time, confusion crossed Oliver's face. "I don't know. He has other kids visit sometimes. I hear them." A pause. "He has a room I'm not allowed to go in. He calls it his studio. That's where he takes the pictures." Morales exchanged a significant look with Jessica over Oliver's head. This was no longer just about Oliver. This was potentially a serial predator with multiple victims. "You've been incredibly brave, Oliver," Morales said, her voice warm with genuine admiration. "The things Mr. Davidson did and said, none of that was your fault. He was wrong, not you." Oliver looked at her directly for the first time, searching her face for truth. "Is he going to jail?" "We're going to do everything we can to make sure he does," Morales replied. "And you just helped us a lot by telling the truth." As if on cue, a soft knock came at the door, and another detective poked his head in. "Detective Morales?" A word. Morales excused herself, leaving Jessica and Oliver in a moment of fragile silence. Jessica wanted to say something, anything, to ease her son's pain. But what words could possibly bridge the chasm of trauma between them? "I'm sorry, Mom," Oliver whispered, his voice small yet somehow filling the entire room. "No," Jessica said fiercely, turning in her chair to look at him directly. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have protected you. I should have known." "He said you wouldn't believe me," Oliver continued, as though he hadn't heard her. "That's why I didn't tell." Jessica felt her heart crack along new fault lines. "I will always believe you, Oliver. Always. No matter what." Oliver studied her face, searching for certainty. "Even when I mess up? Even then? Especially then?" Jessica fought to keep her voice steady. "Nothing you could ever do would make me stop loving you or believing in you. Nothing." Before Oliver could respond, the door opened again. Detective Morales returned, followed by a woman in a crisp pantsuit carrying a leather portfolio. Her expression was professionally neutral, but the tension around her eyes betrayed the gravity of the situation. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Veronica Cartwright from the Department of Children and Families," Morales said. "She needs to speak with you about temporary arrangements for Oliver." Jessica's stomach dropped. "Arrangements? What do you mean?" "He's coming home with me." Miss Cartwright took the seat Morales had vacated. "Mrs. Reynolds, I understand this is difficult, but when allegations of abuse arise, we're required to assess the home situation before. He wasn't abused in our home, Jessica interrupted, her voice rising. He was abused by a neighbor I trusted while I was working to support us. Mom! Oliver's voice trembled with fresh fear. What's happening? Cartwright's expression softened slightly. Your mom is right, Oliver. You didn't do anything wrong. But part of my job is to make sure you're in a safe place while we sort everything out. He is in a safe place, Jessica insisted, her arm tightening protectively around Oliver's shoulders. With me. His mother. Morales cleared her throat. Mrs. Reynolds, we've recovered evidence from Mr. Davidson's apartment. Photos, videos. It's worse than we thought. I don't see how that's relevant to whether Oliver comes home with me, Jessica said, though a chill ran through her at the implications. It's relevant because there's evidence that suggests other children were involved, including some who may live in your building, Morales explained carefully. Until we can determine the extent of Davidson's network and activities, we need to ensure Oliver's continued safety. Jessica felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. You think there are others? Other predators? Morales chose her words carefully, mindful of Oliver's presence. We don't know yet, but Davidson's computer contained communications that suggest he wasn't acting entirely alone. The implications washed over Jessica in sickening waves. How deep did this go? Who else in their building, their community, was involved? Her eyes returned to Oliver, small and bruised beside her, and a fierce, primal protectiveness surged through her. He's not leaving my sight, she said flatly. You want to investigate? Fine. Place me under 24-hour surveillance if you have to. But I am not being separated from my son. Mrs. Reynolds, Cartwright began. It's Ms., Jessica corrected sharply. And I'm a registered nurse at this hospital. I have an apartment with a deadbolt and a bedroom for my son. I have no criminal record, no history of neglect or abuse. What I have is a job that requires long hours to keep a roof over our heads, and a mother who's been ill. Yes, I made a horrible, unforgivable mistake in trusting Davidson. But separating me from my son now would only compound his trauma. A tense silence followed her outburst. Oliver pressed closer to Jessica's side, his small body trembling. Finally, Morales spoke. There may be a compromise. Ms. Cartwright, what about emergency placement with family, with Ms. Reynolds present? Do they have relatives in the area who could temporarily move in? Before Cartwright could answer, Jessica's phone rang. The sound was jarring in the emotionally charged room. She glanced at the screen, recognition flashing across her face. It's my sister, she said, a note of disbelief in her voice. She's in the military, Afghanistan. She never calls at this hour. Take it, Morales encouraged. It might be relevant to our discussion. Jessica answered with a hesitant, Maggie? The voice on the other end was tinny but clear enough for those in the room to hear. Jess? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. What's going on? The Red Cross message said there was a family emergency. Jessica's eyes widened. Red Cross? I didn't send any message. Well, someone did. My CO pulled me from patrol and told me to call home immediately. Said it was about Oliver. A look passed between Morales and Cartwright. The timing was too coincidental. Maggie, Jessica said, her voice unsteady. Something has happened. Oliver is... He's been hurt. We're at the hospital now. Hurt? How? Is he okay? The fear in Maggie's voice was palpable even through the phone's small speaker. Physically, he'll recover, but... Jessica trailed off, unwilling to explain the full situation with Oliver right beside her. It's complicated. When can you come home? That's why I'm calling. I'm already on a transport to Bagram. They're emergency deploying me back to the States. I should be home within 48 hours. Relief flooded Jessica. Maggie. Solid, dependable Maggie who had practically helped raise Oliver during his first years while Jessica finished nursing school. Who had joined the military to help support them when Oliver's father disappeared before he was even born. Ms. Cartwright, Jessica said, newfound hope steadying her voice. My sister is a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army. She's being emergency deployed home and will be here within 2 days. Would her presence in our home satisfy your concerns about supervision? Cartwright considered this development. Potentially, we would need to conduct a background check, but military service is generally viewed favorably. If she's willing to stay with you and provide additional supervision, it could work as a temporary arrangement. Maggie, Jessica said into the phone. Social services is involved. They're concerned about Oliver staying with just me. If you could stay with us when you get back. Of course, came the immediate reply. Whatever you need. Both of you. Plans were hastily made. Maggie would call with her exact arrival time. In the meantime, Cartwright reluctantly agreed that Oliver could remain with Jessica, provided they stayed at the hospital until morning when a more thorough home safety assessment could be conducted. As the details were finalized, a heavy exhaustion settled over Jessica. The adrenaline that had sustained her was ebbing, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Oliver, too, was fading, his body slumping against hers as the emotional toll of the night caught up with him. Morales noticed their fatigue. There's a family room on this floor with a pull-out couch. Why don't you two try to get some rest? I'll have an officer posted outside. No one will bother you. Jessica nodded gratefully. What about him? She couldn't bring herself to say Davidson's name again. He's in custody, Morales confirmed. No bail, given the nature of the evidence and the potential flight risk. He won't be getting anywhere near Oliver again. The family room was small but private, with a window overlooking the hospital's inner courtyard. The first pale light of dawn was just beginning to touch the eastern sky, turning the night's heavy clouds to a somber lavender. Jessica helped Oliver onto the pull-out couch, carefully arranging pillows to support his injured arm. Try to sleep, sweetheart, she murmured, brushing his hair back from his forehead. I'll be right here the whole time. Oliver looked up at her, exhaustion making his bruises stand out even more starkly against his pale skin. Promise. I promise. Jessica settled beside him on top of the blankets, giving him space while remaining close. I'm not going anywhere. Oliver's eyes drifted closed, his breathing gradually evening out as sleep claimed him. Jessica watched him, this child who had endured unimaginable horrors while she remained oblivious. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, but she made no move to wipe them away. Outside the door, the officer Morales had assigned stood at attention, a visible reminder that the danger had not entirely passed. Beyond him, the hospital was waking to another day. Shift changes, breakfast carts, the endless rhythm of medicine that had structured Jessica's life for so long. But in this small room, suspended between night and day, Jessica made a silent vow to her sleeping son. Things would change. She would change. The trust between them, so badly damaged by her absence and Davidson's cruelty, would be rebuilt, stronger, unbreakable. Dawn broke fully over Boston, bathing the city in a cold, clear light. Jessica did not sleep. She kept vigil, her eyes never leaving Oliver's face, as though her gaze alone could protect him from the shadows that had already taken too much. The Dorchester Heights Community Center buzzed with tension. What had begun as an emergency neighborhood meeting about safety concerns had quickly revealed its true nature, a battleground. On one side sat Jessica Reynolds, her sister Maggie beside her in crisp civilian clothes that couldn't hide her military bearing. On the other, a cluster of residents led by Eleanor Simmons, the head of the building's tenant association and a 20-year fixture in the community. Between them stood Marcus Powell, the property manager, visibly uncomfortable in his role as mediator. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his perspiring face as he addressed the room of nearly 60 residents. I want to emphasize that this meeting is not about assigning blame, Powell said, his voice strained. It's about ensuring the safety of all residents moving forward. Not about blame? Eleanor's voice cut through the murmurs. At 67, with steel-gray hair and a spine to match, she commanded attention without effort. A respected member of our community has been arrested on allegations that have yet to be proven in court. Meanwhile, Rumors are destroying the sense of security we've worked years to build. Jessica felt dozens of eyes shift to her. 3 weeks had passed since that terrible night in the hospital. 3 weeks of police interviews, social worker visits, and therapy appointments. 3 weeks of watching Oliver withdraw further into himself, jumping at shadows and waking screaming from nightmares. Maggie's hand found Jessica's under the table, a silent show of support. Her sister had arrived exactly as promised, marching into the hospital with duffel bag in hand less than 48 hours after their phone call. She'd taken emergency family leave, 12 weeks, and moved into their spare bedroom without hesitation, becoming Oliver's constant companion while Jessica navigated the labyrinth of legal and medical appointments. "These aren't merely allegations," Jessica said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The police found evidence in Mr. Davidson's apartment. Physical evidence. Which none of us has seen," countered Eleanor. "William Davidson taught children for 30 years without a single complaint. He volunteers at the Literacy Center. He's been nothing but an asset to this building since he moved in." "He had a record," Detective Morales interjected from her position near the wall. Though not officially part of the meeting, she'd come at Jessica's request. "In Nebraska, 2 allegations that were dropped when the families suddenly moved away. We've located one of those families. The pattern matches what happened here." A murmur rippled through the room. Eleanor's supporters exchanged glances, some uncertain, others unmoved. "If that's true," said Martin Green, a retired accountant from the second floor, "why wasn't it caught before he moved here? Don't they do background checks?" Powell shifted uncomfortably. "Our standard background check includes credit history, rental references, and a criminal record search. Mr. Davidson had no convictions, just as Detective Morales said. The allegations were sealed as part of the settlements." "Settlements?" Maggie repeated, her voice carrying the sharp edge of her military training. "He paid them off." Another ripple through the crowd, louder this time. Jessica scanned the faces around her. Some she recognized from years of hellos in the hallway or elevator. Others were strangers, despite living mere walls away. How many had children? How many had left those children with Davidson, believing as she had that he was a kindly retired teacher with time on his hands? "Mrs. Patel," Jessica said suddenly, addressing an Indian woman in her 40s who sat near the back, her 8-year-old daughter beside her. "You brought cookies to Mr. Davidson's apartment a few weeks ago. Do you remember?" Mrs. Patel nodded, confusion crossing her face. "Yes, it was Thursday. I made too many for my cooking class." "Why?" Jessica hesitated, aware of Oliver's privacy but needing to make these people understand. "You saved my son that day. Davidson was about to—" She couldn't finish, but her expression conveyed what words couldn't. Mrs. Patel's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in horror. She pulled her daughter closer, whispering something in her ear before sending her to wait in the hallway with an older boy who must have been her son. "Ravi spent time with Mr. Davidson," Mrs. Patel said after the children had gone, her voice trembling, "for English tutoring. He said Mr. Davidson was helping him prepare for the spelling bee." Her eyes sought Jessica's across the room, a mother's fear recognizing its twin. "Did he?" "We're still investigating all potential victims," Morales interrupted gently. "But this is exactly why we're asking parents to speak with their children and report any concerning interactions." "This is outrageous," Eleanor broke in. "We're treating a man as guilty before his trial. William has friends here, supporters. He deserves the presumption of innocence. And our children deserve protection," Jessica countered, a new fire in her voice. "I'm not asking anyone to form a lynch mob. I'm asking parents to be aware, to talk to their kids, to look for signs I was too blind to see in my own son." A tense silence followed. Jessica could feel the room shifting, invisible lines being drawn as people processed the implications, deciding where they stood. Powell cleared his throat. "In light of the ongoing investigation, the management company has implemented new security measures. Key fob access only to all exterior doors. Security cameras in common areas. Background checks are being expanded for new tenants. A bit late for that, someone muttered. What about Davidson's apartment? Asked a young father Jessica recognized from the playground. All his stuff is still there. My kids ask about him every time we pass his door. The apartment is considered a crime scene, Morales explained. Once the investigation concludes, management will handle it according to tenant law. And his rent? Eleanor pressed. Is he expected to pay while incarcerated? Or is management planning to evict a man who has yet to be convicted? Powell's discomfort visibly increased. The legal department is reviewing our options. Mr. Davidson paid 6 months' rent in advance when he moved in. There are still 4 months remaining on that payment. Jessica felt bile rise in her throat at the thought of Davidson's presence lingering in the building through his possessions. His paid rent, his defenders like Eleanor. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her notes, suddenly desperate to escape the suffocating tension of the room. I think we've covered the essential information, she said, rising from her chair. Detective Morales has left contact information for anyone with concerns or information. The victim advocate's number is there as well, for families who may need support. Eleanor stood as well, her height allowing her to meet Jessica's gaze directly across the table. Jessica, no one is saying what happened to Oliver wasn't terrible. We're all devastated. But destroying a man's reputation before he's had his day in court. His day in court will come, Jessica interrupted, her voice low but intense. And when it does, Oliver will have to relive every moment of his trauma in front of strangers. He'll have to face the man who hurt him and be called a liar by defense attorneys. So forgive me if I don't share your concern for William Davidson's reputation. Without waiting for a response, Jessica gathered her belongings and headed for the door, Maggie close behind. As they crossed the room, Mrs. Patel intercepted them, her eyes bright with unshed tears. My Ravi, she said softly. He has been having nightmares, refusing to do homework. I thought it was normal boy things, but now, she pressed a slip of paper into Jessica's hand. My number. Perhaps we could talk? Mother to mother. Jessica felt a complex wave of emotion. Grief for another child who might have suffered, relief at finding an ally, determination to create some meaning from their shared pain. Of course, she said, tucking the paper carefully into her purse. Anytime. Outside, the early October evening had turned cool, leaves skittering across the community center parking lot in the brisk wind. Jessica took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air that didn't carry the weight of accusation and doubt. You did good in there, Maggie said, her arms slipping around Jessica's shoulders. Even with the battle-axe brigade against you. Jessica leaned into her sister's strength, allowing herself this brief moment of weakness. They're scared, Mags. It's easier to believe I'm overreacting or Oliver is confused than to accept that they might have left their children with a predator. Maybe. Or maybe they're just assholes. Maggie's bluntness, honed by years in a male-dominated military, was oddly comforting in its familiarity. Come on, let's get back to Oliver. That new art therapist is coming at 7, right? The mention of Oliver redirected Jessica's focus. Her son had been with Mrs. Houghton, their elderly neighbor who had stepped forward to help after learning what happened. Unlike some in the building, Mrs. Houghton had never doubted Oliver's account, perhaps because, as she'd confided to Jessica, her own brother had suffered similar abuse as a child. Yes, Dr. Wilson. She specializes in trauma work with children. The victim advocate says she's the best. As they walked to Maggie's car, Jessica's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but with so many agencies and officials involved in Oliver's case, she'd learned to answer every call. Hello, Ms. Reynolds? This is James Bennett from the district attorney's office. Jessica tensed. Bennett was the prosecutor assigned to Oliver's case. A serious man with kind eyes that belied his reputation as a relentless advocate for child victims. Mr. Bennett, is everything okay? I was hoping we could meet tomorrow. There have been some developments in the case that I'd like to discuss in person. Developments? Jessica stopped walking, causing Maggie to turn back with a questioning look. Good or bad? Bennett's pause was slight but noticeable. Complex. What time works for you? They arranged to meet at his office the following morning. By the time Jessica hung up, her momentary relief at escaping the community center had evaporated, replaced by a familiar anxiety that had become her constant companion. The DA wants to meet, she explained to Maggie as they resumed walking. Won't say why over the phone, which is never a good sign. Maggie's expression hardened. Want me to come with you? I can reschedule Oliver's physical therapy. Jessica considered it. Having Maggie there would be a comfort, but Oliver needed stability and routine more than Jessica needed emotional support. No, stay with him. Keep everything as normal as possible. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Besides, how bad could it be? They've got photos, videos, Oliver's testimony. Davidson's going away for a long time. But even as she said it, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Dr. Naomi Wilson's office was deliberately unlike a traditional therapist's space. No leather couch, no desk creating barriers between her and her young clients. Instead, the room resembled an art studio, with easels set up near large windows, shelves filled with art supplies of every description, and walls covered in children's artwork. Oliver sat cross-legged on a large cushion on the floor, a sketch pad balanced on his knees. His physical bruises had faded to yellowish shadows over the past 3 weeks, but the wariness in his eyes remained unchanged. Dr. Wilson sat nearby, giving him space while remaining accessible. At 35, with warm brown skin and a cloud of natural curls framing her face, she had the rare ability to put children at ease without trying. She had been working with Oliver for 2 weeks, slowly building trust. "You're using a lot of black today," she observed, her tone merely curious, not judgmental. Oliver glanced up briefly, then returned to his drawing. The page was dominated by a large house, rendered in heavy black lines. Most tellingly, it had no doors, only windows with what appeared to be bars across them. "It's not a happy place," he said after a long pause. "The house in your drawing?" Oliver nodded, adding more bars to a window. "It's where the bad things happen." Dr. Wilson watched him work, noting the intensity with which he pressed the pencil to paper, the careful attention to certain details while others remained abstract. "Is it a house you know?" she asked. Oliver's hand stilled. "Sort of. It's like Mr. Davidson's apartment, but worse, bigger." This was new. In previous sessions, Oliver had drawn abstract representations of his feelings or safe places he imagined. This was the first direct reference to Davidson or the abuse. "Worse how?" Dr. Wilson kept her voice neutral, even as she recognized the potential significance of this shift. Oliver resumed drawing, adding a small figure near one of the barred windows. "More kids. More rooms where you're not supposed to go." His voice dropped to a whisper. "More bad men." Dr. Wilson felt a chill despite the warmth of the sunlit room. Child psychology had taught her to listen not just to what children said, but to what they left unsaid. Oliver's words suggested experiences or fears beyond what he had disclosed about Davidson. "Oliver," she said gently, "did Mr. Davidson ever take you to another house? Or have other adults visit when you were there?" Oliver shook his head, then hesitated. "Not me, but he talked about it. About other special friends who had special houses. For kids who were really good at the picture project." Dr. Wilson maintained her composed expression through years of professional practice, but her mind was racing. If Davidson was part of a network, if he was grooming children for other predators, the case had just expanded beyond a single abuser. Did he ever mention names? Of these other friends or the houses? Oliver's pencil pressed harder, the lead breaking with a small snap. "I don't remember." His breathing quickened, a sign of anxiety Dr. Wilson had learned to recognize. "Can I draw something else now?" "Of course." Dr. Wilson reached for a new sketch pad. "How about we try something different? Can you draw what makes you feel safe?" The shift in focus visibly relaxed Oliver. He set aside the house drawing and began sketching on the new pad, stick figures that were clearly his mother and aunt, holding hands with a smaller figure between them. Dr. Wilson made a mental note to speak with Detective Morales as soon as the session ended. If Davidson was connected to a larger network, the investigation needed to expand immediately. And Jessica needed to be prepared for what this might mean for Oliver and the case. The district attorney's office occupied 3 floors of a government building in downtown Boston. James Bennett's corner office offered views of the harbor, though today the water was obscured by a heavy fog that seemed to hang just outside the windows like a shroud. Jessica sat stiffly in the chair across from Bennett's desk, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from visibly trembling. The prosecutor was reviewing documents in a thick file, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. At 48, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered look of someone who had seen too much of humanity's darkness, Bennett had a reputation for being tough but fair. Beside him sat Detective Morales, her expression carefully neutral. The presence of both the prosecutor and the detective heightened Jessica's anxiety. This wasn't a routine update. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Reynolds," Bennett said finally, closing the file. "I know these past weeks have been incredibly difficult for you and Oliver." "Just tell me what's happened," Jessica said, her patience for pleasantries exhausted by weeks of bureaucratic navigation. Bennett nodded, respecting her directness. "We've uncovered evidence that William Davidson was not acting alone. Digital forensics found encrypted communications on his computer linking him to at least 3 other individuals involved in child exploitation." Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. "What does that mean for Oliver's case?" "It means the scope has expanded," Morales explained. "What began as a case against one offender is now a multi-jurisdictional investigation into a potential trafficking network." The word trafficking hung in the air, its weight almost unbearable. Jessica had worked enough shifts to know what it meant. Children bought and sold, moved from abuser to abuser like commodities. Was Oliver? She couldn't finish the question. "No," Bennett said firmly. Based on all evidence and Oliver's statements, Davidson had not yet involved him in that aspect of the operation. But he was grooming him, preparing him. The special project Oliver mentioned was part of that process. Relief, sharp and temporary, washed over Jessica. "Then why are you telling me this? If it doesn't directly involve Oliver?" "Because it changes how we approach Davidson's prosecution," Bennett interrupted gently. "We're now looking at federal charges in addition to state charges. Multiple agencies are involved. And," he hesitated, exchanging a glance with Morales. "And," Jessica prompted, dread pooling in her stomach. "Davidson's attorney has reached out about a potential plea deal. He's offering information about the network in exchange for consideration in sentencing." "No," the word burst from Jessica before she could stop it. "Absolutely not. He tortured my son, took pictures, threatened him, and you want to offer him a deal." Bennett leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. "I understand your anger, Ms. Reynolds, but consider this. Davidson going to trial means Oliver testifying, being cross-examined by defense attorneys who will try to discredit him. It means those photos potentially being entered into evidence. It means years of appeals and parole hearings, repeatedly dragging Oliver back into the trauma. A plea deal, if properly structured," Morales added, "could spare Oliver that ordeal while still ensuring Davidson serves significant time. More importantly, it could lead to the identification and prosecution of others in the network, potentially saving dozens of children from abuse." Jessica felt trapped between impossible choices. The thought of Davidson receiving any leniency made her physically ill. Yet the prospect of Oliver enduring a trial, facing his abuser, being questioned and doubted, that was equally unbearable. "What would the deal look like?" she asked finally, the words tasting like ash. 20 to 25 years, no possibility of parole for at least 15, Bennett replied. "Sex offender registration for life, permanent restraining order protecting Oliver, and full cooperation in the investigation and prosecution of his associates. Without the deal, what's he looking at? Maximum of 40 years on the state charges. But with a good attorney, multiple appeals, the possibility of parole after 10 to 12 years exists. And no guarantee he'd provide information on the network." Jessica closed her eyes, trying to process. The system that was supposed to protect children seemed designed instead to offer second chances to those who harmed them. How could she explain any of this to Oliver? "I need to think about it," she said finally, "and discuss it with Oliver's therapist. This isn't just my decision." Bennett nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course, but we'll need an answer within the week. Davidson's attorney is pushing, and we can't afford to lose his cooperation if it means shutting down this network." As Jessica rose to leave, Morales touched her arm lightly. "There's one more thing you should know. Dr. Wilson called me after Oliver's session yesterday. He drew a house, mentioned other bad men and children. It aligns with what we're finding in Davidson's communications." A cold dread settled over Jessica. "What are you saying?" "Oliver may know more than he's consciously told us," Morales explained gently. "Davidson might have spoken more freely around him than we realized. Which means he could be a key witness against not just Davidson, but others in the network," Bennett finished. "If it comes to that." Jessica felt her world tilting yet again, the ground beneath her feet no longer stable. She had wanted justice for her son, protection for other children. But at what cost to Oliver's recovery? "I'll let you know about the plea deal," she said numbly, gathering her purse. "But I won't let you turn my son into your star witness against a trafficking ring. He's been through enough." Bennett's expression was sympathetic but resolute. "Ms. Reynolds, if there comes a point where Oliver's testimony could prevent other children from suffering as he did, I hope you'll reconsider." The implied ultimatum wasn't lost on Jessica. Help them willingly or be compelled by subpoena. The justice system, it seemed, could be as cruel in its mercy as in its punishment. The Art Therapy Center was housed in a converted Victorian home in Jamaica Plain, its bright yellow exterior a deliberate contrast to the serious work that happened inside. Jessica sat in the waiting area, thumbing mindlessly through a magazine while Oliver worked with Dr. Wilson in a session room down the hall. Her meeting with Bennett and Morales had left her shaken, uncertain which path would best protect Oliver. The plea deal would spare him a trial but leave the lingering question of whether justice had truly been served. Fighting for maximum punishment would mean subjecting her already traumatized son to the additional ordeal of testifying. And now this new complication, Oliver's drawings suggesting knowledge of a larger network. How much had he seen? How much had Davidson revealed, perhaps not realizing the significance of what he was sharing with a child he considered under his control? "Ms. Reynolds." Jessica looked up to find Dr. Wilson standing in the doorway, her expression serious but not alarming. Oliver wasn't with her. "Is everything okay?" Jessica asked, setting aside the magazine. "Oliver is finishing up a drawing. I wanted to speak with you privately first." Dr. Wilson took the seat beside Jessica, turning to face her directly. Today's session was significant. Oliver produced several drawings that provide important insights into his experiences. "Detective Morales mentioned you called her about yesterday's drawing. The house." Dr. Wilson nodded. "Yes, and today he expanded on that theme. But what I want to discuss goes beyond potential evidence." She paused, choosing her words carefully. One of Oliver's drawings today was particularly detailed. It shows what appears to be a specific location, a room with distinctive features that he describes as the picture room in Mr. Davidson's apartment. Jessica's pulse quickened. "I thought the police searched the entire apartment." "They did, but according to Oliver's drawing, there's a hidden space accessible through what looks like a regular closet. He was very precise about its location and how to access it." "Why would he draw that now, after all these weeks?" Dr. Wilson's expression softened with understanding. "Trauma doesn't process linearly, Ms. Reynolds. Oliver is feeling safer, more supported. As that safety grows, his brain is allowing him to access memories that were too threatening before. Or he's making things up," Jessica said, voicing the doubt that would inevitably come from Davidson's defenders, creating fantasy scenarios to please the adults questioning him. "I've been working with traumatized children for 15 years, Dr. Wilson said, her voice gentle but firm. "Oliver's drawings exhibit a level of detail and consistency that invention rarely achieves. More importantly, They contain elements he would have no way of knowing unless he'd experienced them directly. She handed Jessica a folder containing copies of Oliver's drawings. I've already shared the originals with Detective Morales. She'll be obtaining an additional search warrant based on this new information. Jessica opened the folder with trembling hands. The first drawing showed the familiar layout of Davidson's apartment, rendered with surprising accuracy for a 9-year-old. But off the bedroom was a space Jessica had never seen. A small room with cameras, lighting equipment, and what appeared to be a bed. Oliver had labeled it the secret room in his childish handwriting. The second drawing was a close-up of a bookshelf with an arrow pointing to a specific book, Mythology Stories, indicating it was somehow significant. The third showed a small door behind the shelf. But it was the fourth drawing that made Jessica's blood run cold. A stark, barred window above a simple bed, with small shapes that might have been children sitting on the floor. In the corner stood a stick figure labeled Mr. D, holding what looked like a camera, and beside him, another figure, taller, with a shock of red hair, labeled simply the other man. He drew another person, Jessica whispered. Someone specific. Dr. Wilson nodded gravely. Davidson wasn't working alone, as your prosecutor has already discovered. Oliver's drawing suggests he witnessed interaction between Davidson and at least one other member of the network. Jessica closed the folder, unable to look at the images any longer. What does this mean for Oliver? For the case? It means, Dr. Wilson said carefully, that Oliver possesses information of significant value to the investigation. Whether and how that information is used will depend on many factors, including your decisions as his parent and the judgment of the investigative team. They want him to testify, Jessica said, the words bitter on her tongue. Not just against Davidson now, but against an entire network. That would be one option, Dr. Wilson acknowledged. But there are others. Oliver's drawings might provide sufficient evidence without requiring his direct testimony. Or his information might simply lead investigators to other evidence. She placed her hand gently on Jessica's arm. No matter what, my priority, and I hope everyone else's, remains Oliver's healing. Before Jessica could respond, the door to the therapy room opened and Oliver emerged, clutching a new drawing. His face looked lighter than it had in weeks, as though unburdening himself of these secrets had eased some invisible weight. Mom, he said, holding out the paper. I drew this for you. Unlike the stark, troubling images in the folder, this drawing showed 3 figures holding hands under a bright sun. A woman with long brown hair, a boy in the middle, and a taller woman in what looked like military fatigues. Along the bottom, Oliver had written in careful letters, My family. Jessica felt tears prick her eyes as she took the drawing. It's beautiful, buddy. Is this us? Oliver nodded, pride visible beneath his usual caution. You and me and Aunt Maggie. Dr. Wilson said I should draw what makes me feel safe. The simple statement cut through Jessica's swirling thoughts, bringing clarity. Whatever decisions lay ahead, plea deals, testimony, investigations, this was what mattered. Oliver feeling safe. Oliver healing. Oliver reclaiming his childhood from the shadows Davidson had cast. I love it, she said, drawing him carefully into a hug that he didn't flinch from for the first time since that terrible night. And I love you. Over Oliver's head, she met Dr. Wilson's gaze. The therapist gave a small nod of approval and something more. A silent acknowledgement of the difficult path ahead and the strength Jessica would need to navigate it. As they left the center, Oliver's hand tucked trustingly in hers. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morales. Search warrant approved. Executing tonight. Call me tomorrow. Jessica slipped the phone back into her pocket without responding. Tonight was for Oliver, for normal things like dinner and homework and perhaps, if he was willing, a short walk to the park that had once been his favorite place. The battle for justice, with all its compromises and complications, would still be there tomorrow. The October afternoon had turned golden, sunlight filtering through trees just beginning to turn. Overhead, a flock of geese flew in perfect V formation, heading south for winter. Oliver pointed up at them, his face momentarily alight with the simple wonder of a child. Jessica watched him, memorizing the moment, storing it against the darker days she knew still lay ahead. The battle lines had been drawn, not just between those who believed Oliver and those who defended Davidson, but between justice and healing, between the needs of one child and the protection of many. And Jessica stood at the center of it all, trying to find a path forward that wouldn't require sacrificing her son's recovery on the altar of the greater good. "Mom!" Oliver's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you okay?" Jessica squeezed his hand gently. "Yes, buddy. I'm okay. Let's go home." But as they walked toward the subway, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that their definition of home had been irreparably changed. The apartment that had once been their sanctuary now felt contaminated by its proximity to Davidson's, by the knowledge that just across the hall, evidence of unspeakable crimes might still be hidden behind a bookshelf. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new decisions. For tonight, Jessica would focus on the small victory represented by Oliver's drawing, the knowledge that despite everything, he still had a place where he felt safe. It wasn't much, perhaps, but in the storm they were weathering, it was enough to keep them afloat for one more day. Jessica stared at the ceiling of her bedroom, watching dawn gradually paint it in shades of pale gold. Sleep had eluded her again, her mind too occupied with the weight of decisions that seemed to have no right answers. Beside her on the nightstand lay a legal document, the prosecutor's formal offer of a plea deal for William Davidson. 25 years with possibility of parole after 18. Sex offender registration. Restraining orders. And most importantly, Oliver spared from testifying, from being cross-examined, from facing the man who had stolen his innocence. All it would cost was the certainty of Davidson paying the full price for his crimes. All it would require was Jessica signing away her demand for absolute justice. The buzz of her phone startled her. Detective Morales. Even at 5:47 a.m. "Hello," Jessica answered, her voice rough from lack of sleep. "We found it," Morales said without preamble. Exactly where Oliver's drawing showed. A hidden room behind the bookcase in Davidson's bedroom. Accessed by pulling out a specific book, a volume of Greek mythology. Jessica sat up, suddenly fully awake. "What was inside?" "Evidence," Morales replied, her professional tone not quite hiding her disgust. "Photos, videos, documentation of activities, but also ledgers, correspondence, electronic devices. Names, Ms. Reynolds. Many names. Of victims. Some victims, yes, but also clients. Collaborators. This is bigger than we initially thought." There was a pause before Morales continued. "There was a red-haired man in many of the photos, just as Oliver drew." Jessica's free hand gripped the bedsheet until her knuckles whitened. Oliver's drawing had been accurate, painfully, terrifyingly accurate, which meant everything else he'd drawn, everything he'd disclosed in those silent, careful sketches, was likely true as well. "What does this mean for the case?" she asked. "It means the federal investigation just expanded exponentially. And," Morales hesitated, "it means Oliver's information is even more valuable than we realized. The prosecutor will want to discuss how to proceed." Jessica glanced at the plea agreement on her nightstand. He already sent over the paperwork for Davidson's deal. 25 years. That was before we found this room, before we understood the full scope. Morales's voice softened slightly. "The offer might change now, for better or worse. Davidson's information is worth more to us, but so is a conviction based on this new evidence." After hanging up, Jessica sat motionless, watching the rectangle of sunlight on her wall grow brighter. Outside her bedroom, the apartment was quiet. Maggie had taken the early shift, allowing Jessica a few hours to sleep after another late night of discussions with the prosecutor and victim advocates. The discovery of the hidden room changed everything and nothing. It validated Oliver's account, providing irrefutable evidence of Davidson's crimes. But it also thrust them deeper into an investigation that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day. Jessica reached for the plea agreement, skimming its clinical language once more. 25 years had seemed insufficient for the man who had tortured her son. But if signing meant Oliver could begin healing without the additional trauma of a trial, With sudden decision, Jessica tore the document in half, then quarters, then eighths. Whatever deal might be offered now, it would be different. The landscape had shifted overnight, and she would not make this decision alone. Oliver sat in Dr. Wilson's office, his legs dangling from the chair, not quite reaching the floor. 2 months had passed since that first night in the emergency room. The physical bruises had faded completely, though he still favored his right wrist occasionally when tired. Today they were not drawing. Today was for talking. A step Dr. Wilson had approached carefully, allowing Oliver to set the pace for when words might accompany his powerful images. "The police found the room you drew," Dr. Wilson said, her voice level. "You helped them discover very important evidence." Oliver's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and vindication crossing his face. "They found the secret door? Behind the mythology book?" "Yes, exactly where you showed them. You have an excellent memory for details." Oliver picked at a loose thread on his jeans. "Mr. Davidson said I was observant. That's why he chose me for his project." Dr. Wilson noted the lack of fear in Oliver's voice when mentioning Davidson, a significant improvement from the early sessions when he would physically withdraw at the slightest reference to his abuser. "What do you think he meant by that?" she asked. Oliver considered the question with the seriousness of a much older child. "He said some kids don't notice things. But I do. I remember things. Like the red-haired man in your drawing? Was he someone you saw at Mr. Davidson's apartment?" Oliver nodded slowly. "Twice. He came to look at the pictures. He had a funny accent. Not like from here." Dr. Wilson made a note. This aligned with what Morales had shared, that many of Davidson's connections appeared to be international. "Did the red-haired man ever hurt you?" "No." Oliver's response was immediate. "Mr. Davidson wouldn't let him near me. Said I wasn't ready yet." A shadow crossed his face. "But there were pictures of other kids with him. On Mr. Davidson's computer." Dr. Wilson controlled her expression carefully, though her heart raced at this new information. Oliver had never mentioned seeing images of other victims. "That must have been confusing and scary to see," she said. "I thought they were playing a game at first," Oliver admitted, his voice small. "But then I saw their faces. They looked scared, like how I felt when Mr. Davidson got mad." He looked up, his green eyes suddenly intense. "Are they okay? Those other kids?" The question caught Dr. Wilson off guard. In all her years working with trauma victims, she had rarely encountered a child who, in the midst of their own pain, expressed such concern for others. "The police are working very hard to find them and make sure they're safe," she said. It wasn't the whole truth. Some of those children might never be found, might never receive the help they needed, but it was the truth Oliver needed right now. "Is that why they want me to talk in court? To help find them?" So he knew about the possibility of testifying. Dr. Wilson made another mental note to discuss this with Jessica. "Partly," she acknowledged. "Your memories and what you've drawn have already helped the police a lot. But whether you speak in court is a decision for you and your mom to make together." Oliver was quiet for a long moment, his fingers working the thread on his jeans until it came loose. "I'm scared to see him again," he finally whispered. "Mr. Davidson. What if he's still mad at me? What if he hurts Mom like he said he would?" "Mr. Davidson is in jail," Dr. Wilson reminded him gently. "He can't hurt you or your mom anymore. And in a courtroom, there would be many people there to protect you. Police officers, the judge, your mom, me if you wanted me there." Oliver absorbed this, his expression thoughtful rather than fearful. "The other kids didn't have anyone to protect them," he said after a moment. "In the pictures, they were alone." Dr. Wilson felt a tightness in her chest, the professional distance she maintained with all her clients momentarily challenged by this child's compassion in the face of his own trauma. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "when scary things happen to us, we can use those experiences to help others, but that's never an obligation. Your first job is to take care of yourself, to heal." Oliver considered this, then reached for the sketchpad that was never far from his side these days. "Can I draw something?" "Of course." He worked silently for several minutes, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he finished, he held up the drawing. It showed a small figure standing before what appeared to be a judge's bench, with larger figures, clearly adults, standing protectively around him. Above, in careful letters, he had written, "Helping the other kids." Dr. Wilson studied the image, noting both the anxiety evident in the small figure's posture and the determination in the carefully drawn face. "Is this you?" "In court." Oliver nodded. "If I talk about what happened, will it help the police find the other kids? The ones in the pictures?" "It might," Dr. Wilson said honestly. "But Oliver, this has to be your choice. No one should make you do this if you're not ready." Oliver's gaze dropped to his drawing again. "Mom's scared for me to do it. I hear her talking to Aunt Maggie at night sometimes. She doesn't want me to get hurt more. That's because she loves you very much." "I know." Oliver set the drawing aside. "But I think maybe I want to try to talk about it. Not just here, but in court too." His voice grew smaller. "If Mom says it's okay." Dr. Wilson recognized the significance of this moment, a child reclaiming agency after having it violently taken away. Whatever happened next, Oliver had taken a crucial step in his healing journey. "I think your mom will be very proud of your bravery," she said. "But she'll also want to make sure you understand what testifying means. Can be difficult even for adults." "Can we practice?" Oliver asked. "Like a pretend court? So I know what it's like." Dr. Wilson smiled gently. "Yes, we can do that. There are special people called victim advocates who can help you prepare. Show you a courtroom when it's empty. Explain exactly what will happen." For the first time in their sessions, Oliver's posture relaxed completely. He had made a decision, perhaps his first autonomous choice since the abuse began, and the very act of deciding seemed to have restored something essential that Davidson had tried to take from him. "I'm scared," he admitted, "but I think I can do it." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," Dr. Wilson told him. "It means doing what's right even when you are scared." Oliver nodded solemnly, wisdom beyond his years briefly visible in his young face. "Like Mom," he said. "She's scared too, but she keeps fighting." The courthouse hallway gleamed with sterile fluorescence, its marble floors reflecting Jessica's anxious pacing. 3 months after that first emergency room visit, the preliminary hearing for William Davidson was finally underway. Not the trial itself, that was still months away, but the proceeding that would determine if there was sufficient evidence to move forward with all charges, including now federal charges related to child trafficking and exploitation across state lines. Charges that carried potential life sentences. Jessica had spent weeks wrestling with the decision to allow Oliver to testify. Sleepless nights arguing with Maggie. Hours in consultation with Dr. Wilson, victim advocates, and the prosecutors. In the end, it had been Oliver himself who had tipped the scales. "I want to help the other kids," he had said, his small face set with determination that broke Jessica's heart and filled it with pride simultaneously. "Mr. Davidson can't hurt me anymore, but he might still be hurting them." Jessica had set conditions, rigid, non-negotiable requirements for how Oliver's testimony would be handled. He would not be alone on the stand. He would not have to directly face Davidson. He would have breaks whenever needed. A therapy dog would be present. Dr. Wilson would be in the courtroom. And at the first sign of distress, testimony would end, regardless of the legal consequences. "Ms. Reynolds." Jessica turned to find James Bennett approaching, his expression cautiously optimistic. "They're ready for Oliver," he said. "Judge Wilson has approved all the accommodations we requested. Davidson will be seated where Oliver can't see him, and the therapy dog is already in place." Jessica nodded, trying to swallow past the tightness in her throat. "And the red-haired man? Have you identified him yet?" Bennett's expression tightened. "Yes, Interpol had him on their watch list. Anton Kozlov, a Russian national with ties to Eastern European trafficking networks. He's still at large, but there's an international warrant for his arrest." The knowledge that one of the men in the photographs, one of the men who had viewed Oliver as potential prey, was still free made Jessica's skin crawl. But she pushed the thought aside. Today was about Davidson. One monster at a time. "I'll get Oliver," she said, turning toward the small conference room where Maggie waited with him. Is Detective Morales here? Front row, Bennett confirmed, along with representatives from the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit. This case has their full attention now. Inside the conference room, Oliver sat beside Maggie, dressed in the navy blue blazer and khaki pants they had purchased for the occasion. His hair was neatly combed, and he clutched a small stone, a courage stone Dr. Wilson had given him, in his right hand. Hey, buddy, Jessica said, keeping her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. It's time. Are you ready? Oliver looked up, his green eyes serious but clear. Is Bear there? Bear was the golden retriever therapy dog who had worked with Oliver during his preparation sessions. Yes, he's waiting for you in the courtroom, Jessica assured him. And Dr. Wilson is there too. You remember what we practiced? Oliver nodded. Answer the questions truthfully. If I don't know something, I say I don't know. If I need a break, I ask for one. And I can look at you or Dr. Wilson or Bear whenever I want. Jessica knelt before him, straightening his already straight tie. That's right. And what's the most important thing to remember? That none of what happened was my fault, Oliver recited. And that I'm safe now. Jessica felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away. Exactly. I am so proud of you, Oliver. No matter what happens in there, I want you to know that. Oliver's small hand reached out to touch her cheek, a gesture of comfort that should have been hers to give, not his to offer. It's okay, Mom. I can do this. Maggie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, stood and adjusted her own blazer, the closest thing to a uniform she had packed for what was supposed to be a brief emergency leave. 3 months later, she remained, having extended her leave to its maximum limit. All right, Reynolds family, she said, her military bearing providing the structure they both needed in this moment. Let's go show them what we're made of. The courtroom was more crowded than Jessica had expected. Beyond the usual legal personnel, several rows were filled with observers, detectives, FBI agents, victim advocates, and, most surprisingly, parents of other potential victims identified from Davidson's records. Mrs. Patel sat near the front, her husband beside her, both nodding encouragingly as Oliver entered. Davidson sat at the defense table, his once grandfatherly appearance now diminished by 3 months in custody. His gray hair had thinned, and his shoulders hunched forward in the ill-fitting suit provided by his attorney. As promised, he was positioned where Oliver wouldn't have to see him, though Jessica felt his gaze like a physical weight as they walked to their seats. Bear, a large golden retriever with gentle eyes, an especially designed vest identifying him as a courthouse therapy dog, waited beside the witness stand. At the sight of Oliver, his tail thumped once against the floor in restrained greeting. The court calls Oliver Reynolds, the bailiff announced after preliminary matters were addressed. Jessica squeezed Oliver's hand one last time before he walked forward, small but straight-backed, to be sworn in. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, spoke directly to him. Oliver, do you understand why you're here today? Yes, Your Honor, Oliver replied, his voice soft but clear in the hushed courtroom. To tell the truth about what Mr. Davidson did. That's right. And do you understand the oath you just took? To tell the truth. Oliver nodded, then remembered to speak aloud. Yes. It means I promise to only say things that really happened, not make anything up. The judge smiled slightly. Very good. Now, the lawyers are going to ask you some questions. If you don't understand something, or if you need a break, what will you do? I'll tell you, Oliver said, and I can pet Bear if I get scared. That's exactly right. The judge turned to the prosecutor. Mr. Bennett, you may proceed. What followed was both better and worse than Jessica had feared. Bennett was gentle but thorough, guiding Oliver through his relationship with Davidson from the beginning. The initial kindness, the gradual boundary violations, the escalation to physical and emotional abuse. Throughout, Oliver remained composed, one hand resting on Bear's head, occasionally glancing at Jessica or Dr. Wilson for reassurance. It was when they reached the subject of the photographs that Oliver's composure first wavered. Oliver, Bennett said carefully. You told Detective Morales that Mr. Davidson took pictures of you. Can you tell the court about that? Oliver's breathing quickened visibly. His hand tightened in Bear's fur, and the dog responded by pressing closer to him. He said it was for his special project, Oliver said after a moment. At first, they were just normal pictures, but then he wanted different ones. Different how? Oliver looked directly at Dr. Wilson, who nodded encouragingly. Without my shirt, or in just my underwear. He said all real models have to do that. Jessica clenched her fists in her lap, focusing on Oliver's strength rather than the rage that threatened to overwhelm her. Beside her, Maggie's breathing was deliberately measured, the military technique for managing intense emotion visible in the controlled rise and fall of her chest. Did you want to take those pictures? Bennett asked. No, but he said if I didn't, he'd hurt my mom. Oliver's voice cracked slightly, and he showed me pictures of other kids who did what he said. He said they were his special friends, and if I was good, I could meet them someday. Bennett approached the evidence table, lifting a folder. Oliver, I'm going to show you some photographs. These are not the ones Mr. Davidson took of you. Those will never be shown in court. These are drawings that were found in Mr. Davidson's apartment. I want to know if you recognize them. The drawings were color copies of sketches found in the hidden room, childlike illustrations similar to what Oliver produced in therapy, but with darker themes. Images of houses with barred windows, men with cameras, children with tears. Oliver studied each one carefully, then pointed to one showing a house with a distinctive red door. I saw this one. Mr. Davidson had it on his refrigerator. He said it was where his special friends lived sometimes. Did he ever take you to this house? No. He said I wasn't ready yet. Oliver's voice dropped. But the red-haired man wanted to take me there. They argued about it. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This was new information, not included in Oliver's previous statements or therapy disclosures. Jessica exchanged a glance with Detective Morales, whose intense focus on Oliver had sharpened. The red-haired man, Bennett repeated carefully. Was this someone who visited Mr. Davidson's apartment? Yes, twice. Oliver's hand moved rhythmically through Bear's fur, the motion seemingly calming him. He talked funny, not like here. And Mr. Davidson was different when he was there, more nervous. Like when the principal comes to your classroom. What did they talk about when this man visited? Oliver frowned in concentration. Money sometimes, and the special project. And other kids, if they were ready. Ready for what, Oliver? To go to the house with the red door. Oliver looked directly at Bennett for the first time. I think it was a bad place. The kids in the pictures from there looked really scared. Jessica felt a chill despite the courtroom's warmth. Oliver had never mentioned seeing photographs of children at another location. Had he been shielding himself from the memory? Or had he been protecting her from knowing the full extent of what he had witnessed? Bennett moved carefully through a few more questions before addressing the hidden room directly. Oliver, you drew a picture for Dr. Wilson showing a secret room in Mr. Davidson's apartment. Can you tell the court about that room? It was behind his bookshelf, Oliver said, more confident now. You had to pull the mythology book to open it. He took me in there 3 times. What was in the room? Cameras, lights, a bed with no blankets, and computers, 3 of them. He let me play games on one once, but the other ones he said were just for grown-ups. Did you ever see what was on those other computers? Oliver hesitated, looking at Jessica with an expression that asked for permission or perhaps forgiveness. She nodded slightly, trying to convey that nothing he said could change her love for him. Once, he admitted, when he went to answer the door, there were folders with kids' names. And pictures. His voice faltered. Bad pictures. Of kids with the red-haired man and other grown-ups. Bennett approached the bench, speaking softly to the judge. After a brief conference, the judge addressed Oliver directly. I think this is a good time for a break, she said kindly. Oliver, you've been very brave and have helped us understand a lot. Would you like some water or a snack? Oliver nodded, visibly relieved. Can my mom come with me? Of course. As Jessica led Oliver from the courtroom, arm protectively around his shoulders, she was acutely aware of Davidson's gaze following them. For the first time since his arrest, she allowed herself to look directly at him, the man who had hunted her son, who had been grooming him for unimaginable horrors beyond what he had already inflicted. Davidson's eyes, once grandfatherly behind wire-rimmed glasses, now revealed what Jessica had failed to see before. A coldness, a calculation. He met her gaze without flinching, without shame, and in that moment, Jessica understood with perfect clarity that this was not a man who could be rehabilitated. This was predation in its purest form, dressed in cardigans and kindly smiles. In the small conference room, Oliver collapsed into Maggie's waiting arms, while Jessica poured him water with trembling hands. Dr. Wilson joined them, her professional composure intact but concern evident in her eyes. "He's doing remarkably well," she told Jessica quietly. But that disclosure about seeing images of children at the house with the red door, that's significant new information. The defense will likely challenge it. "They'll say he's making it up," Jessica said bitterly. "They'll try." But Oliver's description matches details from files recovered from Davidson's computers. Details that weren't public and that Oliver couldn't have known unless he saw them himself. Oliver pulled away from Maggie, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Did I do okay?" he asked, looking between the three adults. "You did amazing, buddy," Maggie assured him, her usual military stoicism softened by genuine emotion. "I've seen soldiers with less courage than you just showed in there. The hard part is almost over," Jessica added, kneeling before him. "The defense attorney is going to ask you questions next. Remember what we practiced?" Oliver nodded solemnly. "He might try to confuse me or make it sound like I'm remembering wrong. I just have to tell the truth and say if I don't know something." "Exactly. And if you need another break, or if it gets too hard, I'll tell the judge," Oliver finished. "I know, Mom." He reached for her hand, his small fingers interlacing with hers. "I can finish this. For the other kids." Jessica fought back tears, overwhelmed by her son's resilience in the face of trauma that would have shattered many adults. "Okay," she said softly. "Then let's finish it." The defense attorney's cross-examination was clinical and methodical, a stark contrast to Bennett's empathetic questioning. Davidson's lawyer, a sharp-featured woman named Elaine Ross, approached Oliver with professional detachment. "Oliver," she began, "you've told the court about spending time with Mr. Davidson while your mother was at work. How often were you alone with him?" "Almost every day after school," Oliver replied cautiously. "And sometimes on weekends when Mom had to visit Grandma." "And during all those hours, did you ever tell your mother that Mr. Davidson was hurting you?" Oliver's gaze dropped to bare. "No." "Did you tell any of your teachers? Or the school counselor?" "No." "Why not, if Mr. Davidson was hurting you as you've described?" Oliver's answer came without hesitation. "Because he said he'd hurt my mom if I told. And I believed him." If Ross was thrown by the directness of the response, she didn't show it. "You mentioned seeing photographs on Mr. Davidson's computer of children at a house with a red door. When exactly did you see these?" "The second time the red-haired man came over. Mr. Davidson went to get drinks, and I looked at the computer." "And you're certain these were photographs, not drawings like the ones shown earlier?" "They were real pictures, like from a camera." Ross consulted her notes. "Yet, in your initial interviews with Detective Morales and in your therapy sessions with Dr. Wilson, you never mentioned these photographs. Why is that?" Oliver glanced at Dr. Wilson before answering. "I was scared to remember it, and I didn't want to get in trouble for looking at Mr. Davidson's computer when he told me not to." Jessica watched Ross carefully, seeing the slight recalibration in her approach. Oliver's straightforward answers were not providing the openings she had clearly hoped for. "Oliver," Ross continued, "you've stated that Mr. Davidson threatened to hurt your mother if you told anyone about what was happening. Yet according to your mother's work records, she's a trained emergency room nurse who regularly handles crisis situations. Did it seem plausible to you that Mr. Davidson could actually harm her?" Before Oliver could answer, Bennett was on his feet. Objection. Calls for speculation and asks the witness to assess the reasonableness of threats made during a traumatic experience. Sustained. The judge ruled. Ms. Ross, please rephrase or move on. Ross paused, then took a different approach. Oliver, you mentioned a red-haired man who visited Mr. Davidson's apartment. Had you ever seen this man before those visits? No. And you're certain he had red hair? Not brown or blonde. It was red, Oliver said firmly. Bright red like a fire truck. And he had a scar here. He pointed to his left eyebrow. Jessica saw Morales lean forward intently. This detail about a scar had not been mentioned before either. Yet it matched the description of Anton Kozlov in Interpol's files. Ross pressed on for nearly an hour, attempting to find inconsistencies in Oliver's testimony. Throughout, Oliver remained remarkably composed, answering directly, admitting when he couldn't remember details, but never wavering on the core facts of his experience. When Ross finally concluded, the judge gave Bennett the opportunity for redirect questioning. Just one question, Your Honor, Bennett said, approaching the witness stand. Oliver, after everything you've told us today, is there anything else you want the court to know about what happened? Oliver was quiet for a long moment, his hand steady on Bear's head. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the hushed courtroom. Mr. Davidson told me that no one would believe me if I told. That grown-ups always believe other grown-ups more than kids. He looked directly at the judge. I just want you to know that I'm telling the truth. About everything. Even the scary parts one didn't want to remember. The judge's expression softened momentarily. Thank you, Oliver. You may step down now. As Oliver returned to Jessica's side, the courtroom remained silent, the weight of his testimony hanging in the air. Even Davidson's stoic demeanor had cracked slightly, a flicker of unease crossing his face as he whispered urgently to his attorney. The judge called a 15-minute recess before closing arguments. In the hallway outside, Jessica held Oliver close, feeling his body finally relax as the tension of testimony released its hold. You did it, she whispered against his hair. It's over now. But it wasn't over, not really. The preliminary hearing was just the beginning. If the judge found sufficient evidence, and after Oliver's testimony, there seemed little doubt she would, a trial date would be set. Months more of preparation, of therapy, of waiting. Yet something fundamental had shifted today. Oliver had faced his abuser, had spoken his truth despite Davidson's threats and manipulations. He had reclaimed his voice, his agency, his power. Detective Morales approached them, professional restraint not quite masking her admiration. That was remarkable, she said to Oliver, especially the detail about the scar. It helps us confirm without doubt that the man you saw was Anton Kozlov. Is that his name? Oliver asked. The red-haired man? Morales nodded. Yes, and thanks to your testimony, we now have evidence linking him directly to Davidson. That's going to help a lot with the international investigation. Will you find the other kids? Oliver's question was direct, uncomplicated by the political and jurisdictional complexities that Morales navigated daily. The ones in the pictures? We're doing everything we can, Morales promised. And your bravery today has given us new tools to help them. As they returned to the courtroom for closing arguments, Jessica noticed movement near the back entrance. 2 children, a boy about Oliver's age and a slightly younger girl, entered with their parents. The boy's eyes met Oliver's briefly, a flash of recognition passing between them. Mom, Oliver whispered, tugging at Jessica's sleeve. That's Ravi, Mrs. Patel's son. He was in some of the pictures on Mr. Davidson's computer. Jessica's heart sank. Another child from their building. Another family shattered by Davidson's predation. But there was something else in Oliver's expression as he looked at Ravi. Not just recognition, but connection. The shared understanding that only another survivor could truly comprehend. The closing arguments proceeded as expected, Bennett outlining the overwhelming evidence against Davidson, Ross arguing that much of it was circumstantial and that Oliver's testimony contained inconsistencies. But the energy in the courtroom had shifted. The presence of not one but two of Davidson's victims seemed to solidify the reality of his crimes in a way that even photographic evidence could not. When the judge rendered her decision, it was swift and unequivocal. The court finds sufficient evidence to bind the defendant over for trial on all counts, she declared. Bail is denied due to the severity of the charges and the demonstrated flight risk. Trial is set for April 15th. As Davidson was led away in handcuffs, his gaze fell on Oliver one last time. Jessica instinctively moved to shield her son, but Oliver stood his ground, looking directly at his abuser without flinching. In that moment, something passed between them, the final severing of the psychological control Davidson had maintained even from behind bars. Oliver's testimony had broken not just the case open but the chains of fear that had bound him for so long. Outside the courthouse, a light snow had begun to fall, dusting the steps with white. Oliver tilted his face up to catch a snowflake on his tongue. The simple childlike gesture so normal, so precious, that Jessica had to turn away to hide her tears. Maggie's arm came around her shoulders. "He's going to be okay," she said softly. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." Jessica nodded, watching as Oliver carefully formed a small snowball in his gloved hands. "I know, but will I? How do I ever trust anyone with him again? How do I let him out of my sight?" "The same way he found the courage to testify," Maggie replied. "One day at a time, with help." She squeezed Jessica's shoulder. "Speaking of which, I've put in for a transfer to the Boston recruitment office. If it comes through, I can stay another year at least." Jessica turned to her sister in surprise. "Mags, your career can wait," Maggie finished firmly. "Some things are more important. Family is more important." Before Jessica could respond, Oliver approached, his cheeks flushed with cold, snowflakes melting in his hair. He held out the small, perfectly round snowball he had formed. "Can we go to the park?" he asked, a hint of the child he had been, the child he might yet be again in his voice. "Just for a little while?" Jessica looked at her son, at the shadows still visible in his eyes but also at the light that had begun to return, at the courage that had allowed him to speak his truth, at the resilience that might, with time and love and support, allow him to reclaim his childhood. "Yes," she said, taking his free hand in hers. "Let's go to the park." As they descended the courthouse steps, Jessica noticed Mrs. Patel and her family nearby. Oliver saw them too, and after a moment's hesitation, approached Ravi with determined steps. The two boys regarded each other silently, a world of shared experience passing between them without words. Then, with the simple logic of children, Oliver held out his snowball. Ravi accepted it, a small smile breaking through his serious expression. No words were exchanged. None were needed. In that moment, two children who had seen the darkest aspects of humanity found common ground in the simple joy of snow on a winter day. Jessica watched, her heart both breaking and healing, as Oliver and Ravi began gathering more snow, their movements gradually becoming less cautious, more playful. Two mothers stood witness, their eyes meeting in silent understanding across the courthouse plaza. Two families forever changed, yet somehow, improbably, finding a path forward. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be the trial, the media attention, the continued therapy, the long process of rebuilding trust and safety. But watching Oliver laugh, actually laugh, as a snowball disintegrated harmlessly against his jacket, Jessica allowed herself to believe in possibilities that had seemed unimaginable just hours before. Her son had found his voice, and in doing so, he had shown her how to find hers as well, not just as his protector, but as his guide on the long road toward healing. That night, after Oliver had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day but also, perhaps, unburdened by it, Jessica sat at the kitchen table with Maggie, nursing a cup of tea gone cold. "I've been thinking about work," Jessica said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "About my schedule at the hospital." Maggie looked up from her laptop where she'd been researching transfer opportunities. "What about it? I can't go back to those shifts. 60, 70 hours a week. Nights, weekends, Holidays. Jessica traced the rim of her mug with her finger. That's what led to all of this. My absence. Jess. Maggie began, her tone sharp with warning. No, I know what you're going to say. That it's not my fault. That Davidson is the only one to blame. Jessica met her sister's gaze directly. And logically, I know that's true. But the reality is, Oliver needed me and I wasn't there. Maggie sighed, closing her laptop. So what are you thinking? Dr. Patil at the Community Health Center reached out last week. They need a nurse practitioner for their pediatric clinic. Regular hours, Monday through Friday. The pay is less, significantly less, but Oliver would have his mother home every night, Maggie finished. Jessica nodded, the decision crystallizing as she spoke it aloud. We'd have to downsize, maybe move to a smaller apartment, further from the city. But after everything that's happened, I don't think either of us wants to stay in that building anyway. Have you talked to Oliver about moving? Not yet. I wanted to be sure it was the right decision first. Jessica's gaze drifted to the refrigerator, where Oliver's most recent drawing, the family portrait from therapy, was proudly displayed. After today, I'm sure. He needs stability, routine, presence. I can give him that at the clinic in a way I never could at the ER. Maggie reached across the table, covering Jessica's hand with her own. For what it's worth, I think it's the right call. Not because you're to blame, you're not, but because this is what healing looks like. Recognizing what you both need and making changes to support that. It feels like starting over, Jessica admitted. Like everything I worked for, my career, our home, is being washed away. Not washed away, Maggie corrected gently. Transformed. Like Oliver. Like you. She squeezed Jessica's hand. The Reynolds women don't wash away, sis. We rebuild. Jessica smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in what felt like months. The Reynolds women and one very brave Reynolds boy. The apartment fell silent again, the distant sound of traffic a reminder of the world continuing beyond their walls. A world that Oliver would eventually need to rejoin, step by careful step. The trial loomed ahead, with all its uncertainty and potential for further trauma. But something had shifted fundamentally today. A corner had been turned.